Hello and welcome to Your Family Bank podcast. I am your host, Blake Johnson, and I'm really excited about today's session. We are going to be talking about, as always, money and kids and legacy, but we're going to be talking about it in the circumstances of divorce. And I think a very pertinent topic today. And so I've got my guest, Karen, coming on. She is a divorce coach. So Karen, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Blake. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you start off, give us a little bit of background, how you got into what you're doing, and just the short story.
Okay, so the short story is that I'm a divorce lawyer as well. I started out my career not in divorce, and then I opened my own practice, and I said, I will take any kind of case there is except divorce. And you know how that goes. I mean, you make plans and God or the universe or whatever you call the power that is laughs. And so client after client kept coming to me saying, Karen, can you help me with my divorce? Karen, I need a divorce lawyer. And I literally was sitting in my office, looked up at the sky, held up my hands and said, okay, I got it. I'll do divorce. And so that's what started me on that journey in family law. For a long time, I had a general practice. Family law was a piece of it. And over time, I gradually morphed into the place where that was all I was doing. But I was always looking for that better way because I had a lot of experience before I opened my own practice. And so when I went into divorce court for the first time, what I saw there made no sense to me. Like, absolutely none. I mean, it's one thing as a lawyer to be ripping someone's face off in court in cross-examination when you're talking about somebody that ran over a little kid with a car or, created some product that hurt millions of people, right? That's one thing. When you're talking about your spouse and you got to go sit next to them at your kid's soccer game tonight, there is no universe in which fighting and tearing each other apart made any sense to me. So I kept looking for a better way. I was a mediator. I was a collaborative divorce professional. I became an arbitrator, all the things. And finally, I saw the gap between what a divorce lawyer does and what people think a divorce lawyer is going to do. And I realized that I can't change the whole system myself, but I can change the people that go into it that work with me, right? So I went from lawyering to coaching because for most people, divorce is about 10% legal. And they think to go to the divorce lawyer and they think that's all they need. And that is never going to give them the experience that they want. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be time consuming. It's going to be full of conflict and pain. And so I'm trying to minimize that in the best way I know how.
Yeah. So, from one attorney to another, I definitely understand that. And it's just one of those things where the lawyer's got so much other things going on, worrying about your case that they can't help with the actual, side, the personal side of things that needs to happen. The good ones try their best and do that, but the client typically doesn't want to sit down and pay hourly for them to to say
Right.
What's going to happen there. So that's a really unique thing. Until we'd met, I had never heard of a divorce coach, but it's a fascinating thing, and that's why I think we're gonna have a really good conversation today. Before we jump into the meat and bones, I always like to get something unique, find out something unique about our guests. So, what's something most people would not know about Karen?
Well, since this is a money podcast, I'll give you a little bit of my backstory. I grew up, my father had his own business. And so I started working when I was 9 years old. And I can say that because the statute of limitations on child labor has long expired and my dad is gone, God rest his soul. But he had his business and he used to, at that time, install draperies in apartment buildings that were just built. So we went as a family on the weekends and we would work with them. And the best thing he did, he would say, okay, kids, now it's Saturday weekend. It's really hot. We can go to the lake and go swimming, but I've got to work. And if I do it all by myself, we won't go until 5 o'clock at night because I got so much work to do. But if you come and help me, we can get to the lake by noon. And so, of course, that's what we did. And that was my background with business and money.
Okay. Reframing things. It's all about framing things.
It
I
works.
love it. So that leads perfectly into my next question, which is, is there a moment in time when you can think about growing up that kind of shaped how you thought about money for good or bad, like an experience that you had as a kid that set you up either for success or that you had to relearn?
Um, I think my dad was really good with money, and he tried to teach us about, okay, you have to save and you have to invest and you have to work. There were a lot of things that I didn't learn until later that I wish I would have learned sooner. But the one thing that he taught me that was, I think, the most beneficial was money is a tool, that people are the most important thing. And you need money to do the things that you want to do in life, but don't ever get so obsessed with it that that's all you're chasing. You need it. You want to accumulate it. You want to nurture it and grow it, but don't make it the whole focus of your life.
Yeah, that's great wisdom. So sounds like you had a positive experience. Was there any real talk about money as far as like sharing how to invest or talking about, what a budget is or that kind of stuff?
Not so much. My father was investing in stocks, in the penny stocks back in the day. And so I knew he was invested in the market, but he never explained how he did it. So that part, they sort of fell down on the job, so to speak. But I knew he was investing. I knew we were saving. When I was a little kid, we went to our credit union, the local credit union, and I think I opened my first bank account. I don't know, I was 5 or 6. Now, it wasn't just on my name, it was my parents too. But we were taught those values of invest, save, work hard, and everything will grow.
Yeah, it's interesting. The most successful families, we reiterate this over and over again, they teach their kids those principles. They show them how a bank account works. They teach them about saving and investing. But at the same time, there seems to be this gap where they talk about it. They might do some steps, but then we get to a point where like, oh, well, we don't talk about money. And so that's what we're trying to bridge with our podcast here is, how do we open up that conversation with our kids, help them understand those things? And I'm really interested in, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. How does that affect kids during a divorce? What are the big mistakes that people make with their kids with regards to finances when it comes to divorce?
Where do we start? There are so many. And I think one of the biggest ones is when parents get divorced, like no parent wants to screw up their kids. No parent wants to, make their kid live in a broken family with 2 different homes going back and forth between mom and dad. So they have a tremendous amount of guilt. And one or both parents will often then give the child anything they want just to sort of make up for the fact that they're from a broken home, which on the surface makes the parent feel better. And the child is all happy in the moment that, oh, they got their new iPhone or they got their new whatever it was, right? But long term, that does more harm than good. And it also does a lot of harm when one parent becomes, I'm just going to do the stereotypical Disney dad buying the kid everything, and the mom is struggling and can't buy the children everything. And so that now you've got the disparity between what they can do at dad's house, what they can do at mom's house, and their money values become completely skewed because usually they don't have to work for anything. And so they grow up with this distorted idea of money and about everything in the world being about them because their parents have made them the center of the universe because they feel so guilty.
So what can parents do to kind of combat that? How do we make sure, because at that point you're divorced, so it's really hard to have those conversations with the ex-spouse. So how do you open up those lines of communication and kind of talk about those things?
You've hit the nail on the head. Yes, it is hard to have those conversations. So what? You got to do it anyway, right? So it's about, and there are counselors and therapists who will help you bridge the communication gaps. And there are, teach people, even divorced parents, how to communicate better with each other for the benefit of the kids. You don't have to be best friends, but you have to talk about the kids. And you have to find a way to talk about what are going to be the rules going to be in each house. What are the major purchases we are or are not going to make for our kids, especially as the kids hit teenage years. Do we buy them a phone? What kind of phone? What are the rules around the phone? What about a car? What about insurance? Who pays for that? All of those conversations, are they hard? You bet they're hard. Do you need to have them anyway? 100%. And if you,
they're hard even if you are happily married. So, I can only imagine what it's like when you're not.
Yeah, you don't always agree with your spouse about what you should or shouldn't do with the kids. So it is going to be a hard conversation, but you still need to find a way to have it anyway. And if you and your ex are not on the same page, okay, now you know that. And then it's a question of communicating to your children your money values, your rules, and explaining to them why this matters, because when kids think something is arbitrary, they just have this feeling like, that's not fair. How come you're doing this to me? Which isn't at all what you're trying to do as a parent, but it's about explaining to your children, this is what we're doing and this is why, and this is what it means. And I know you don't agree with that, and that's okay. But this is the rules in this house, right? Because fundamentally, if you and your spouse aren't on the same page and they're going to do whatever they're going to do, you can't stop them, you can't control them, but you can keep the lines of communication open with both your kids and, if possible, with your ex as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's been so much research coming out lately about how, the spoiling of our kids, giving them everything, giving them the safe spaces or the extra time for the anxiety and all those things actually hurts our kids because we don't create any resilience in them. And so, it may be hard. The kids may not see that, but when you truly look at it, if you really care about your kids, you're going to have those conversations, and you're going to have to be disciplined yourself in implementing those. I call it manufacturing challenges is really what you need to do, because that's what the science shows. If you do that, your kids are far more likely to be successful, to be resilient, to be able to handle those tough circumstances.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. And so spoiling the children, I know that's a divorced parent's natural inclination, but it's about really being the parent, you're not their best friend. You've got to lay down the rules, and it's harder when you're the only one making the rules. But you still, that's no excuse to just not do it. You've still got to do that. And that doesn't mean you don't, buy your kids stuff and you don't treat them well. But I love the idea of manufactured challenges or even real challenges, right? Something happens with your kids, like you've got more than one kid, siblings fight, instead of saying, okay, to the two kids, you tell me what happened, you tell me your side, and you act as the mediator. It's go in a room and go sort it out, figure it out yourself. And we don't think kids can, and we create children who can't.
Yeah, it's whatever we think about them, that's what the reality becomes. So if you think they can do those things, guess what? They can. It surprises me over and over again with my kids. If I ask them to do something and let them try, how much they can figure out and do, even at a young age. And it's all because I said, yeah, you can do this, and I know you can. And so they have that confidence and they figure it out. It's us as the parents. We want to protect them. It comes from a place of love, but that's the problem is we're the ones who actually hurt them because we say, oh, you can't do that yet. You're not old enough. That's not safe.
Yeah. Or they do something and it's not, I'm using air quotes here, perfect, right? And so we say, no. If you do it this way, we can do it so much better. But that's not what this is about. It's about them learning how to do something. And if it isn't perfect, great. They figured out that didn't work. Let's try it a different way. I got a lesson. I got a lesson from one of my nieces. I've got 4 kids of my own, but I was with, one of my nieces when she was growing up, and I had decided something should be done a certain way. I was teaching her how to put on makeup or something, and things went in a certain order. Well, she started doing it in a different order. And I knew how that was going to go. I knew what her face was going to end up looking like with makeup all over the place, right? And so I tried to correct her, and she was crushed. And I will never forget that moment, because she was right and I was wrong. And I was just, I apologized, saying, you know what, honey, do it any way you want to do it. And when your face looks funny, you'll wash it off and try again.
Yeah, it's so hard not to step in and make that correction right away. But that's where we rob our kids of all that, the learning. You think about it for yourself. When did you learn the best? What were the life-changing things? It was probably when your parents let you mess up and do something stupid, and then you never forgot it because of that.
Yep, 100%. And it comes back to the money thing again. When parents, the divorced parents, the child drops their cell phone and breaks it, right? So now the cell phone, the screen is cracked. Instead of saying to them, well, I guess you're going to live with a cracked screen, the parents say, oh, that, I'll just get you a new one. I'll just replace the thing. No, I mean, the kid, they need to have consequences. They need to understand that in the real world, there's no fairy godmother that comes down from the sky and gives you whatever you need or whatever you want because you want it. Life doesn't work that way. And if they don't learn that lesson when they're little, they're going to learn it in a so much more painful way when they're older.
Yeah, I would much rather my kids learn and have those experiences in a controlled environment where, it's I'm the one who's kind of overseeing that versus, somebody else who does not care about them.
Yep, I agree 100%.
So you mentioned you have kids of your own. What were some things that you did as a parent that you found useful to help teach your kids about money, financial literacy, stewardship? So not necessarily even money related, but things that you found that were super helpful with teaching your kids these principles.
Well, first of all, in full disclosure, I acquired my children later in life. So I got married later in life, and my husband had them ready-made, and they lived with him. So they became mine. They are mine as far as I'm concerned. So I got them, the youngest two were in their teenage years, but going into college, because this is another place where a lot of parents struggle, a lot of divorcing parents struggle. Do you just give them a college education? And so my kids knew there was X dollars put away for you for college, period, full stop. If you wanted to go to an expensive college and you were going to spend X in 2 years, then you were going to take a loan or figure out how to pay for the other 2 years. If you didn't use it all, if you got scholarships and, grants and other things that helped reduce the cost, great, then there was money left over. But there was only X, and they had to budget for X. And so one daughter went through no problem, and the other one was on the 5-year plan. And at the end of the money, it was, okay, you got to get a loan. And you got to figure out how you're going to finish school, because you knew this from the get-go. It wasn't a surprise. And we talked about it, and it worked beautifully. And all of my kids are super responsible with money now. And not that it was all my work. My husband had a lot to do with it. But I'm really proud of them.
Yeah, I think the key things there are, one, it's clear expectations. That always is the key in anything that you're trying to teach your kids. Clear expectations. This is what I expect of you. Here is the exact budget, and we're not deviating from that. And then second step is stay committed to it. Don't jump in because, they need it, whatever reason. Yeah. It's clear expectations and stick to it. And that can be applied to any kind of scenarios. The college topic is an interesting one with my wife and I. We fight about this because she worked her way through school, paid for everything 100%. I came from a family where my dad had a 529, so my tuition was covered, and then I had to have a job to pay for the other stuff. So we both still agree on working, but it's, do we contribute anything versus nothing? And so, that's another line of communication, right? We have to sit down, talk, what is our compromise here? How are we going to do that? And so, but once again, now that we have our plan, it's clear communication, and the kids know that's why they have a caramel apple business, because they have to pay for a lot of college. And so it's not also, just leave them out to the wolves. I'm sure it was, hey, I'll sit down and help you budget, or I'll help you compare the things. If you bring them to me, we can discuss them, right? It wasn't just, here, you're on your own, good luck.
Yeah, no, it's not like that at all. But it's an important conversation that the kids know. And what you're doing that's brilliant is letting them know from a young age, this is going to be the deal. You're not waiting till they're seniors in high school to spring on them. Oh, no, we're not contributing, or we're only going to give you X amount of dollars. They know this. They can plan for it or not plan for it. And, when the time comes, they're going to have to live with whatever the choices were that they made.
And more importantly, you parents have to live with that decision as well. Don't jump in and save them last minute.
I actually have a friend who's a financial advisor, and she came up with this plan for her kids. And I think it is just brilliant because she also had 4 children, 3 boys and then a girl. So the kids had a basic allowance they would get, growing up, and they would do chores and they'd get an allowance. And sometimes the kids would come to her and they're like, hey, Mom, I need $20 to go to the movie. Hey, Mom, I need this or that. And with the boys, she said it was never a big deal. They were always pretty much within the budget. But then the daughter came along, and the daughter was like, Mom, I need this new dress, or can I have $20 to go to Starbucks, or can I? And it just kept adding up. And so she said, okay, enough. You get X dollars per month, whatever it was, $100 a month. And for that, you're going to do these chores. And you're paying for all your own clothes. I'm not buying you any clothes anymore. This amount, whatever it is, should cover your clothes. It should cover your coffees, or soft drinks. It should cover movies. It's going to cover everything. So every month I'm just going to give you this money, and you can do with it whatever you want. But that's it. And the daughter's like, oh, yeah, good. I get this big chunk of money right away. Well, you know what happened the first month, right? She
spent it all the first day.
Yeah. And then it was, hey, Mom, I need $20 to go to the movies. And her mom said, no, you got your money for the month. If you spent it, I'm sorry. Like, there is no more. And she stood her ground. And she said it was the most fantastic thing she ever did, because her daughter had to learn how to be responsible with money. And she did.
Yeah, I love that. I love that she stood her ground, because that's the hardest part, is to see him being left out socially, probably for 3 weeks out of the month, not being able to go do anything. But it's also, if she wanted to, she probably could have gotten creative and figured out ways to earn money or whatever it was.
Yep. And I think my friend might have given her that out and said, well, if you want to do these extra chores, you can earn whatever extra. But they were hard lessons, but it's in the hard lessons that the learning comes.
Yeah, that is a quote that, I'm going to circle for this episode. It's in the hard lessons that the learning sticks. That's for sure. Anything that is important that I've learned in my life, it came from one of those struggle scenarios, not from something that came easy.
I know. Same here.
So let's talk a little bit about legacy. Okay. What is it that you want the legacy to be remembered for with your kids?
Oh, with my kids. Just that I think I have a little bit of sensitivity around the fact that I didn't actually birth any of them. So I just want them to look at me like mom, like a real mom, not a replacement mom, not a stepmom. I don't know why in the fairy tales, the stepmom is always like the wicked witch. They always get a bad rap, right? I want to break that stereotype and be not just a stepmom, but a mom.
Okay. And what are the things that you hope to do from like an estate planning perspective that will help kind of solidify that? We've talked a lot about, we're not just going to give our kids things and whatnot. So how do you carry that forward with your estate planning portion of your legacy?
I haven't done the trust yet. However, that's probably going to be what's coming down the pike, to leave the kids something. Or the other thing that I've thought of doing is to invest with them in a property so that they have something that's income producing to start their own life their lives on their own and for their own kids, right? So that I have a friend, for example, whose grandfather bought a building in Chicago back in the day. He was an immigrant from Greece, and he bought a building. And that building, it was a business and office building, right? And he scraped together everything he could. He worked really hard, all the things. That building paid for every one of his grandchildren and great-grandchildren's college tuition. That's what I would like to do, something like that for my kids, so that there's money for them to follow their dreams and for their kids to get an education and follow their dreams.
So that's interesting with that. So what are the restrictions you're going to put on there so it's not just a handout, so they appreciate it and they actually, still have that struggle that we talked about, that manufactured struggle?
Well, at this point, my kids are adults, so I don't think I have to manufacture struggles. They have it. But they all, thankfully, they get along. But I've also seen where families break apart over money when a parent passes, and I don't want my kids to do that. So I will most likely put whatever is left to them, which I hope is an income producing asset, in a trust with rules that say, this is, how much you can take out, or who has to agree, or what happens, and who's going to mediate if there's a disagreement, because everybody wants to think, oh, my kids will get along just fine. But I'm sure you've seen it, and I've seen it so many times where families implode, like it's worse than divorce, because they're all fighting over the money, and the entire family falls apart because the matriarch and the patriarch passed away.
Yeah. My quote around that is, you think that your family's different. I'm here to tell you they're not. They're not special. They're going to fight as well. That's just the case. But the ones who are the most successful are the ones who've already taught their kids those values. And so they don't need the money because they know, I'm confident I can go get it. I can make whatever. So it's not a big deal. They're not fighting about those things. It's when there's been that entitlement mentality that carries over. That's what makes it usually when the problems arise.
Yes. And I would say, getting the theme of marriage back in there too, it depends on who your kids married. They might not have that entitlement attitude, but if they married someone who does, who's in their ear whispering, oh, you should be getting more, oh, you should be doing this, or you should be doing that, that's a recipe for disaster as well. So no matter how well you taught your children, as lawyers, we know it's best to, make sure the rules are clearly laid out, that you've got an estate plan, that you don't leave everything just to chance or just to them. And everything is crystal clear and locked down and tied up. And that's the best thing you can do for your kids, I think.
Yep. And then communicate that as well. Communicate it to the spouses when they come in. Hey, here's our values. Here's what we're doing. This is how it's going to be laid out, and give them a chance to have that open dialogue with you as part of your estate plan. So they can ask questions. It's when, it just all of a sudden falls on them. They don't know who to question, why they did it, whatever. If you give them a chance to ask those questions, you're also going to prevent a lot of fights.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really important as well. And also, as parents, you have to consider, who are you leaving the money or the asset or whatever it is to? Is it just your child, or is it your child and your spouse? Because I've also seen in the work that I do where one spouse knows the other spouse is likely to inherit something. So it's not a good marriage, but they're sticking around hoping that they get a piece of the pie. And then when they do, they're like, see ya, bye. That's all. And that's painful. That is so painful when they take a piece of your inheritance, and that they shouldn't be able to do that because it's not marital property. However, there are ways to get around just about everything. And if you as a parent leave it to the two of them, then it belongs to two of them, not just your child.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We could spend all day talking horror stories about those things for sure. We're getting near the end here. So, anything else that that we missed in regards to kind of divorce, and especially with relation to the kids, that you think our listeners should know about?
The only other thing that I would encourage people to do is, yes, you want to impart money values to your children, but you want to keep your kids out of the middle of money between you and your spouse. Your children do not need to know how much you pay in child support, whether your spouse made the payment or didn't, what their, oh, your father's not paying this or your mother didn't contribute to that, that puts the kids in the middle. That gives them a negative experience with money. I would just encourage everybody, please don't do that. I mean, yes, you want to teach them money values. That is not the way to do it.
Yeah, you teach them what you control, how you spend your money, how you invest, the positive sides of things. Even if it's talking about, hey, we can't do this because we are paying for this thing, we're investing in this piece of real estate, whatever it is. But yeah, don't bring up the negativity between the spouses. I love that. That's a good message.
Yeah.
Okay, last thing. What is the best advice you've ever been given? Doesn't have to necessarily be related to money.
Oh my goodness. This is a hard one. The best advice all right, so I'll get a little poetic on you. And it comes from Shakespeare. So it's advice I got from a book. And and Shakespeare said in one of his plays, "This above all else, to thine own self be true." So be true to who you are, be true to what your values are, live with integrity. And that was the best advice I've ever gotten.
Okay, love it. Be true. I agree. Don't need to be anybody else. You're already good enough as you are. So let that shine.
Yep, you can be the best you, better than anybody else can be you. And if you try to be somebody else, you're never going to be the best at that.
All right, Karen, thank you so much for being on. How can our listeners connect with you if they want to learn more about what you do and if they're in need of that service?
The best way is at KarenCovy.com. That's KarenCovy.com. There's no E in my version of Covey. Otherwise, I'd be related to someone rich and I wouldn't have to work for a living.
Okay, awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you again for coming on. Hopefully our listeners found a lot of value of that, especially if they are going through that difficult situation of divorce. We'll sign it off for now and we'll catch you guys next time.
Thank you.